Salvador P. Lopez. Because si Lopez, for example, when he became chair of the Commission on Human Rights, John Humphrey was one of the drafters of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Sabi niya, this Lopez is the greatest chair of the commission we've ever seen, ahead of even Eleanor Roosevelt. That was in Humphrey's diary. And of course, if it's diary, it's probably a bit more honest than a public statement. So, definitely meron talagang pride.
Pinoy pride. Do you get that thing from this?
I do, but sometimes iniisip ko yung class na yan that kind of distinguishes itself. It's also evidence of yung great inequality ng Pilipinas, because like you have a really well supported intellectual class that can thrive because of whatever private money,
Brahmins, kind of like the Brahmins of the Philippines,
because of opportunity. But at the same time, these are not avenues that are available to everyone else. And it kind of sucks. And there was a lot of, I feel like there was a lot of probably there's a bit more social mobility in the mid 20th century than we have now. And I think we really need to think about, the state of our public schools and yung social mobility. So, one thing I realized, for example, yesterday, I was researching yung childhood ni Gerardo Sicat, one of Marcos's chief technocrats. At pag kinausap mo ngayon si Jerry Sicat, he's the most konyo person around. Akala mo lumaking mayaman kasi he's a man associated with the trappings of power, and he's very urbane, very soft-spoken. Pero ang background pala ni Jerry Sicat is that neither of his parents finished high school, and he went through the public education system all the way until UP. And then yung PhD niya to MIT was like pure grants, Rockefeller grant, Fulbright, walang individual.
Self-made gentleman, if I can put it that way.
Sobrang self-made. And I had always thought that he was just like his, best friend Cesar Virata, who was actually who belonged to the property class. Hindi, So may mga ganyan kang kwento. I wonder how many of the technocrats in our future will look like, will have a story similar. Whether you like Sikat or not, his story is kind of nice, right? His story of upward mobility is nice. I wonder if other people will have that kind of same biography in the future.
Speaking of inequality, speaking of not sustaining momentum, I mean, that was the problem with Bandung Conference, right? There was the Afro-Asiatic, conferences after that. There was the non-aligned movement, which still exists. It has a secretariat. I think Venezuela was one of the latest chairs of it, which just tells you about where the direction of non-alignment is going.
Wala na, Laos na.
Yeah, Laos na, but what is the fundamental reasons there? I mean, one, obviously, you can look at the wars among post-colonial nations, China versus India, India versus Pakistan, Iraq invading Iran, Vietnam versus China. Another one, obviously, you could say that the West also didn't give much of a chance for this to flourish. Remember, in the 1960s, there were discussions about the new international economic order, right? Whereby, commodity exporting countries from Latin America, Middle East, the idea was we're getting more and more leverage in international trade, and then that was immediately reversed, especially with the debt crisis and all of the McNamara and other kinds of interventions that happened. Again, I'm very indebted to Vijay Prasad's book, A History of Poorer Nations, for appreciating this, as much as, of course, yung Lodi natin si Walden Belli has written also fantastic on this stuff. So the Bandung spirit or promise, Bandung spirit, I think that was the article that Romulo wrote, no? Kind of faded into history, right?
Yeah. I'll offer two other reasons why. Well, una, the end of the Cold War. So yung kind of capacious middle, kasi wala ka ng Soviet Union. Hindi na neither US nor Russia. So yung intellectual capacity niya to critique both systems, wala na. And then, of course, China medyo at the end of the Cold War hindi pa ganun kalakas. In fact, as China emerges and kind of replaces Russia, and as you said, this might be the real Cold War. We don't know, although nagka-crisis yung China ngayon. Then that actually might be the opportunity to articulate a new Bandung, because if this is the real Cold War. The other thing I'd say, bakit nalaos yung Cold Wars, yung Bandung, is because as opposed to non-alignment as an important source of solidarity, region became an important source of solidarity. So you get the emergence of the African Union, for example. You get the emergence of Mercosur in Latin America, and then of course you get the emergence of ASEAN in Southeast Asia, and then of course on a more broader level, the kind of regionalization that occurs after the Plaza Accord, wherein you have the United States as the guarantor of regionalization in Asia, and Japan as the secondary guarantor of that regionalization in Asia. So yung kind of yung yung middle big brother and big brother setup ng Asia relative to ng Asia Pacific, like which you see of course in APEC.
Definitely. I mean, my sense is this is a good way to transition now to the BRICS, because before going to the critique of BRICS, I mean, first of all, let's talk about the paradoxes and ironies of the BRICS. BRICS today is very much known and very much in the headlines because of the so-called de-dollarization, challenging Western hegemony. But the concept of BRICS came from a Goldman Sachs report. So it's like, how ironic can you get, right? I mean, like, for all their anti-dollar Western stuff, it actually came from a Goldman Sachs report by Jim O'Neill, right? Who is still alive and still saying a lot of stuff about BRICS. The second thing is, the one financial institution that the BRICS has created, the New Development Bank, which is based in Shanghai, not only doesn't lend that much, it's in desperate need of dollars itself because some of its members like Russia. So like there are a lot of ways to be a little bit like, this is like more like Andrew Tate kind of hype machine that maraming dodginess going on. But the reality is that, Leloy, there is also some prestige to BRICS, right? Because of presence of big developing countries. Kaya nga sabi ko, if G7 were business class, this is at least premium economy in terms of at least simplism, right? But right, having said that, I mean, if you look at the expansion of BRICS just the other day, you have 6 new countries coming in, and I absolutely have no idea what was the criteria for that, right? I can see a lot of energy.
Medyo surprising na laki, di ba? Kasi meron talagang dilution of power, may dilution of power din ng konti. So we don't know kung ano yung status sila. Is there going to be tiered membership na now, di ba? Are their votes going to be smaller than the votes of the original BRICS? So we don't know.
You're right. And I mean, of course, you have Saudi Arabia there, which is a major oil exporting, energy exporting country. You also
have traditional partner of the United States.
Exactly. And then also the same thing with United Arab Emirates, right? Which is also very close to the US, but also has close relation with China. And then you have a country like Iran, which is very anti-West, at least the regime there, but also a major oil exporting country. For me, the good thing, though, with the inclusion of those 3 countries is, as you know, the 3 countries are now trying to explore a détente, if not a rapprochement, which, by the way, was brokered by China. So the BRICS could be an institutionalized platform for dialogue, because as Filipinos, we don't want these countries at war with each other because we have millions of Pinoys in the Middle East, not to mention price of oil and gas. So actually, the more Saudis, Persians, Emiratis talk, it's better for us. So actually, I like the fact that this country is in. And then you have Ethiopia.
In that sense, may pattern. Pero Ethiopia is actually, you mentioned Ethiopia, it's weird. It's not a middle power. It's really poor, and it just went through
trouble, right? They have a civil war.
They went through a civil war, and the reason why they're there is because they're the African country that's closest to China. So merong ano dyan, may mga straightforward power play moves dyan in terms of yung membership.
Yeah, bro, why not Nigeria, right? Which is the biggest of Africa. And dami Nigerians napaisip like, wait, what? And then maraming Kenyans nagpaisip like, wait, what? Like it's like parang kinalimutan mo Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Malaysia, biglang nag-jump ka sa, I don't know, Cambodia, Philippines.
Kenya would be a heavy Kenya would be the real heavy hitter, no? Actually, Kenya's parang mga Pilipino din yan, di ba? Parang meron ding deep tradition of parang intellectuals who distinguish themselves globally.
Makulit sila. I mean, Barack Obama, right? And of course, runners, fantastic run. Kipchoge, I mean, mga Lodista, marathon, mga Kenyans. And Kenyans, you're absolutely right. They're the Eastern Africa superpowers in many ways, economically, intellectually, etc. And then you have Argentina. Probably it's the Messi effect, or like Lula saying, let's put our amigos on the other side so there's no trouble. You know what I'm saying?
Medyo close din ba sa mga Chinese ang Argentina?
I mean, you could probably say all 6 countries are close to China. So India successfully pushed for Emiratis, UAE. I think the Chinese were on board for Iran and Saudi Arabia, so that you have the 2 poles of power. The Indians insisted on Emirates, and then Indians successfully insisted against Pakistan being brought in because the Chinese really wanted to bring in Pakistan. But magulo yan, bro. Magulo yan. So there's clearly a power struggle going on between India and China here. I mean, obviously, Brazil and South Africa are closer to the India position, but they're weaker than India in terms of saying no to China. While Modi Macho siya eh. He can say no to China and they actually dun sa pictures pinahiwalay sila ni Xi Jinping and Modi. Medyo medyo malalim problema. Bawal ang TikTok ngayon sa India. No? I mean, just to give an idea how things are deeply conflictual between the two countries and the two macho guys. And many Indians, Lelo, are making arguments that you and I are about to make, which is BRICS may give you a vibes of post-West, alternative to West, I don't know, de-dollarization hype, whatever, but it's looking more like a China-dominated organization at the rate it's going, because China is just so much bigger than everyone else. And China, I mean, if you look at the total exports of BRICS, like 90% is manufacturing from China, something like that. Like it's ridiculous. And the rest are more energy exports. And guess who buys their energy? Of Iran, Saudi, Russia, China again. So like, kung India, medyo ilang ka dito eh. Like, what's gonna happen here? So this is what people are not appreciating about the BRICS. Indians are feeling very uncomfortable with where BRICS is going, despite at least getting the Pakistani question right so far, and the Emiratis in. So this is where I agree with some of our Indian friends, Raja Mohan, for instance, to flag some of the fantastic writers there. You can read his works also in Foreign Policy magazine. That this is not Bandung. This is looking like, I don't know, like Soviet Union having a second shot as having its own Warsaw Pact or something like that. Or maybe that's an exaggeration. I mean, for me kasi, ganito Lele, just end on this.
Baka walang mangyari. Kung
Ako kasi Leloy, my ideal situation is post-America but not Pax Sinica, right? Essentially a middle power world. That's my ideology. So dun sa mga idiots who are trying to dismiss me as, ng Amerika yan, ganun, like, get out of here. You guys are either not reading or tamad kayo or, well, mahabang usapan yan. Bayaran siguro yung mga iba dyan. I am for middle powers of this world. So I like that Iran, Saudi Arabia, Emiratis, Indians, I don't know, Brazilians have more say in international affairs, because I don't want the Americans and all to be gatekeepers forever. They shouldn't have been to begin with. But at the same time, like, this looks like a very China leaning situation, right? How do you feel about it?
I just want to say na my ideal version is like, yeah, maybe middle powers, but actually like a lot of democracies participating in a global order. So
Indonesia and Turkey were not in. That's the surprise. Hindi sinamang Indonesia, Turkey.
In that world, I think the US would still play a role, but they would play a role equivalent to the role, say, of Japan, Germany, Korea, ganyan. So Australia, yeah, that kind of world that's kind of run by those democracies, wherein there's no big brother. Hindi big brother in US, but it would play with those democracies in a kind of collaborative way, and hopefully the Philippines becomes part of that. That's my ideal world. Kasi ayoko pa rin talaga sa mga Modis, India, ganyan. Takot pa rin ako sa mga ganyan.
Or MBS. I mean, Saudi
Arabia. MBS, yeah.
To be clear, when I talk about Saudi Arabia, I'm not talking about the regime. I'm just saying, you want the major Muslim countries.
And while I'm encouraged by where Brazil is now, you never know. You never know where they'll be in a few years. We know na very
He's
vulnerable.
our champion in BRICS, right? And better B comes first. Yeah. Although I'm wondering, Lelo, sorry, I'm talking over you because alam ko dami mong sinabi sa previous episodes. So I just want to, share.
Okay lang. Yeah.
More my area. No, I mean, good luck with the acronym now, right? Like, wag lang Brooks or something like that. Or mga acronym ngayon with all of these new letters and countries coming in. But for me, Indonesia not being included is interesting. And in fact, one version I heard is Indonesia backed out because they didn't want to be seen as joining a pro-China kind of world. And even Turkey naman, because they're NATO member, mukhang there's some mutual concerns also there. I mean, Russia is
kahit recalcitrant NATO member. NATO member pa rin.
Yes. So yun nga, kasi for me, those two perfectly meet all the criteria. They're the two large trillion-dollar economies. They're democracies, or in the case of Turkey, at least semi-democracy, Muslim majority countries, and yet hindi sila sinama. So I think that in itself says a lot about the potentially troubling direction of BRICS and why we should not be overexcited. Nevertheless, premium economy is always better than economy two.
Yeah. And you don't need to displace the US dollar as the global reserve currency. You only need to increase non-dollar trade. And for China, that's already a benefit, lalo na if there's a long game. And if the long game is, I guess, to displace the dollar as the reserve currency so that you have more flexibility. That takes some time naman talaga eh. And if you look at how the dollar displays the pound sterling, for example, it took a while actually, and there was a time roughly in the 1910s and 1920s, roughly when at the time when we were a colony of the US, where sabay siya as a global reserve currency. So the way global reserve currencies work is hindi siya yung parang may isang reserve currency and then overnight na displace. Nagsasabayan siya for a while and you can have multiple global reserve currencies at the same time. This was just like proven by the work again of my favorite economic historian, Barry Eichengreen, na hindi siya path dependent, tas gano'n na overnight. May
My
moments
contingency, my path breaking, drift, my historical drifts. Yeah. Thank you so much on that, Leloy. We'll close this episode. We'll have another short episode. Just balikan natin ng Pilipinas. After all, you know, we're Filipino scholars. Let's talk about our man of the hour, BBM. According to some historian, he's a very normal guy. So how normal is normal? and how good is normal? We'll have a separate episode, Leloy. Wag ka muna sumagot. Let's close this episode on this.
Sige.
Excited.